I've been joining some game jams recently, trying to become less terrible at game development. Before I joined game jams, my games used to look like this. And now my games look like this. Still terrible, but that's not the point. Anyway, for my first game jam, I already significantly improved. My second jam had potential, but I am physically incapable of making good level design. My third jam was GMTK, and the game was just terrible. Like, how did I even come up with this garbage? So, hopefully fourth time's the charm depending on the theme. Well, that's just great. My only goal with my ideas was to avoid adding a real storm to the game. I felt that my takes on themes were always super mundane, so I wanted to do something original this time. My first idea was a brainstorm, probably because that's what I was doing. Then my friend came up with a game about climbing a mountain, but I've already made a game about descending a mountain, and there's tons of mountain climbing games out there. Suddenly, I remembered something out of nowhere. The Last Stand mode from Plants vs Zombies was actually perfect for this jam. You get a limited amount of currency to calmly build defenses, and then you have to hope it survives the storm of enemies. Now the question was about how I was going to differentiate it. In Plants vs Zombies, you use plants to defend a house from enemies, so I thought, what if the house was the defense? Now you need to build a house that can withstand a storm. Yeah, I did not manage to avoid adding a storm, unfortunately. So that was the idea, but I've never made a tower defense game of any kind, and when I thought it over, I realized there's no way I'll have a whole house building system along with the rest of the game in 7 days. I decided to make it so that you place objects around the house to protect it instead, and with that, I got to work. I had decided that this game was going to be my first attempt at HD graphics since all of my 2D games before this were pixel art. First, I added a simple field where the game will take place. Then, I made the silliest house of all time to go on top of it. Someone told me that this looks like the house from Peppa Pig, but I do not see the resemblance. Anyway, after being told that I had 5-star graphics on my hands, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I made a custom font for this game? I tried to make a font before, but I didn't know what I was doing then, and now I did. So after over 2 hours, I had the basic letters for the font in place. Just the letters. I had no idea what to actually add around the house, so as a placeholder I just made this iron block that you could spawn with the click of a button. Of course, you should actually be able to pick where you place it, so I got to work on that next. And that was all I got done on the first day, but it was decent progress. Now that I had the absolute bare basics of the game, I went back to graphic design and made a button texture that I could use all over the game, even for things that weren't buttons. If MS Paint core graphics were considered great, then the game is starting to look pretty great now, but none of it matters if there's no gameplay. My plan was to have you, the person who lives in the house, stand outside while you build, and when you go to sleep the storm starts. I later scrapped the person though. And the sleeping, that's gone too. For the storm, I made this cool looking texture to scroll across the screen. Someone later told me that it scrolled really slowly, so I sped it up, and also said that I would add rain. Back to the UI once again, I created a money and wave system, so now all the game needs is something to happen in the storm for it to be technically playable. For that, I made a downright terrible tree sprite, like it's not even silly, it's just terrible, and made them fly around completely randomly during the storm. After adding wooden blocks, I remembered I also needed each object to slowly break when they got hit. I planned to add a Minecraft-like block breaking system, but then I was just too lazy to make the texture, so a health bar will have to do. God, I scrapped a lot of stuff, didn't I? Also, all of the objects you place are rigid bodies, so they can and will get knocked over. Now I needed some variation in the flying objects, and my friend suggested a bathtub, so I made some randomized flying bathtubs that somehow looked even worse than the trees. The next day, I worked on sounds. I recorded some simple sound effects, and then it was time for music. The first track had to be calm, tranquil, relaxing. Well, that works, I guess. Before working on the storm music, I added this absolutely beautiful rubble texture that is a work of art and not at all lazy. Now, for the storm music, I knew it had to be intense, but not too intense. My first attempt absolutely didn't fit with the game whatsoever. It is pretty good though. Anyway, on the next attempt I had something half decent, and half decent is good enough for me, so into the game it goes. When I was thinking about the game the day after, I realized that just building stuff and nothing else will probably get boring. I also realized that those placeholder wooden and iron blocks probably weren't going anywhere anytime soon. So I added a new tab where you could upgrade the house's foundations and also fully heal it. I was starting to run out of ideas and procrastinating on the settings menu, so I decided to add a silly son who just watches intently while you build. I also needed a lot more variation with the building, so I quickly created an iron bar to go with the 2 blocks, and with the ability to rotate, the building had become far more interesting and strategic. I finally stopped procrastinating on settings to add a setting for the money and HP that you start the game with. There were 3 days left of the jam at this point, so I thought, why not send the game to some friends? I sent it to 3 in total. I'm still unsure to this day if 2 of them even played it, but 1 of them did, and they had some very useful feedback. The game sucked. To sum up what they said, it was gambling without the dopamine. There was now only 1 more day before the jam would end the next morning, so I got to work on rebalancing before it hit me that I still haven't named the game. I had written down some name ideas already, such as House vs Weather and Home Invasion. Which one of these do you think I went for? If you thought any of these, you're wrong. Naturally, I decided to name the game House vs Abnormal Weather Conditions, and I proceeded to make the most beautiful and amazing logo of all video games ever made. I finished up the rebalancing, added volume controls and a full screen option to the settings menu, and I went back to the playtesting phase. I watched someone play it and realized very quickly that the difficulty curve was completely busted. As soon as you hit wave 4, your fate was sealed. I quickly fixed this by adding a super weak door that flies around first, then trees, then bathtubs, and then they start spawning faster, and then from then on they spawn in higher quantities each wave. This seemed to do the trick. And with that, the game was done! Except for the block breaking, the rain, the person, the sleeping, As long as the web build works as intended, I never need to open this project again. Oh. Here's the problem, my font doesn't have its own space graphic, but space is meant to be a blank character. The program I used, FontForge, wouldn't let me make it empty without this happening, so I had to add a random point that will never render anything to fix it. I also realized that I never drew a colon symbol, and what I was seeing before was the Windows default. The default characters were actually taller than my font and messed up line spacing, so now everything was misaligned after fixing the issue. God, I'm never making a custom font again. But with that, the game was done. Until the next morning at least. You see, I thought I was finished, but I actually woke up really early the next day, and there were around 3 hours left until the end of the jam, so I thought I might as well update it one more time. I had found during my own extra playtesting that you could actually make an invincible house with the right strategy, so I nerfed the foundations upgrade to multiply less and less each time. Iron also became super weak over time, so I added an upgrade to reforge it, similar to the foundations upgrade. I also made sure to nerf waves 4 and 5 even further because they were still huge choke points with most players. And before I forgot, I fixed every bug that had been found and aligned these sliders better, because that looked really bad, god. Oh, also I added a setting to set the starting wave so that you could skip to wave 100 and watch the chaos unfold. Anyway, now the game is done for real, and I submitted the project. Again. Overall, I placed 396th. Somehow, I got 45th in the theme category, even though it was super generic. Annoyingly, I placed over 900th in graphics, even though everyone who played the game was a huge fan. Looking back, this game is nothing like Plants vs Zombies, which is great, because now it's original. Anyway, I'll probably make more game development videos in the future, so stay tuned. Bye.